Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're gonna, like I have said to some people already, we're gonna get going on this because I want to respect everybody's time, and we're gonna try to end at 8. If you want to just start putting some stuff in the chat, I asked people earlier to put in where you can put in where you're tuning in from, but if you could say either what is your favorite Trader Joe product or what are you saddest that they no longer carry. It would be fun to put that in the chat. After a while, I'm going to ask people to submit questions. I think we're going to probably not have tons of time for questions because we have a lot, but let's not do that yet, because otherwise that'll get lost in this list of what everybody's favorite products are. So anyway, I'm very, very grateful. My name is Kathy Christie. I'm the president of the Stanford Club of Palos Verdes / South Bay. And we thought this was going to be a very small little book club just discussing this wonderful book. And then we were lucky to get connected to Patty Civalleri, Patty Civalleri and Leroy Watson. Patty is the co-author of this book with Joe Coulombe, and Leroy was the first employee and a good friend of Joe's. So what I'd like to do is ask Patty to say a bit about herself and speak, and then have Leroy say a bit, and then I'll ask some questions, and then we'll take some questions from the floor. So I recommend that if people, instead of seeing all these tiny little squares, if you just want to see the person speaking, in the upper right-hand corner, if you're on a computer, click on view, and you can click on speaker, and that will allow you to see the person who's speaking. And I'm going to just make sure everybody's muted other than me and Patty and Leroy. So anyway, take it away, Patty. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. And thank you so much, everybody, for welcoming us here tonight. When I heard that you all were reading the book, I was absolutely thrilled. Leroy and I were over the moon because I don't know how many people have the book, but on the back of the book, you can see that it's been endorsed by by Jonathan Levin, who is the Dean of the Graduate School of Stanford, the MBA program. And so I love it that this is sort of a big Stanford thing, and I love it. I love the community, the Stanford community. So thank you so much for having us here tonight. If possible, I'd like to share my screen. Is that?
You should still be able to.
Okay.
There should be a button at the bottom that just says share screen.
All righty, and there we are.
Great.
Okay, and so basically this is the founding story of Joe Coulombe, the original Joe, the original founder of Trader Joe's. And this really is the story, his story in his words, of how he built the most, well, what we all consider now to be America's most beloved retail brand. In fact, when I talk to people, nobody can really come up with, gee, what's the second most beloved brand? So I think there's one beloved brand out there, and that's Trader Joe's. My name is Patty Civalleri. I am an author and a historian, archaeology specialist, and I've been writing for many years and publishing. And one day my friend Leroy Watson came to me and said, Patty, could you help me and a friend with a book? And his friend was Joe Coulombe. Well, Leroy Watson, who is here with us tonight, was the first employee of Trader Joe's. And he was there long before, 10 years before it was Trader Joe's. And he stayed with Joe. Actually, he was there for more than 10 years after Joe left the company. So Leroy and Joe ended up being lifelong best friends. And when we set about to publish Joe's story, we signed a contract with HarperCollins. And as soon as we did that, Joe passed away. So that left this project squarely on our shoulders. And it made us more determined to make sure that Joe's story got out there. So thank you again for choosing this book. We are really quite proud of it. Okay, so meet Joe. What I wanted to say about Joe is he definitely saw the world differently. He had a funny bent. He felt that the world, he saw the world through the eyes of a left-hander. And he absolutely felt that left-handers saw the world a little bit differently, and that he also believed that secretly left-handers had a little bit of dyslexia lurking somewhere in their brain, but that they saw the world differently. And he wanted people on his team that would see the world differently. He was out to do something different from the start, and he did not want the same old routine kind of thinking to get in his way. So basically, how did Joe define his market? He really determined his market by teachers, engineers, writers, lawyers, etc. Back after all the wars, World War II and the Korean War and the Vietnam War, the United States made it real easy, the VA programs for veterans to get an education. And suddenly there was an explosion of what Joe nicknamed the overeducated and underpaid. That was his market, the overeducated and the underpaid. He knew there was children out there. He knew there was uneducated people out there. There was all kinds of people. But Joe wanted to create a market for the overeducated and underpaid. So one of the things that Joe did is he had probably the single highest priority that he had in his business were his employees. He felt that without his employees, he wouldn't have the business, he wouldn't be able to grow and run the business that he had. So the question that people often ask is, why would you overpay employees? And Trader Joe's was very famous for doing that. The reason why is because that Joe knew that one of the highest costs of doing business was employee turnover. So when you lose an employee as an entrepreneur, something that you know in your heart, when you lose an employee, it takes 4 to 6 people to replace that employee. So you're constantly going through retraining and all the administration that it takes to bring on a new person and to figure out that that's not going to work and to bring in another one and so forth. So the costs of employee turnover is just huge. But one of the other things he found is he got incredible employee loyalty. His employees, they would all do anything for Joe, and they did. Joe was an incredible visionary, and Joe's right hand, who was Leroy Watson. Leroy was the guy. Leroy, I'm going to talk about you for a second here. Without Leroy, I don't know if there would be a Trader Joe's. Leroy was that right-hand guy that made everything happen. Joe would come up with all these incredible ideas, and he would say, okay, Leroy, make it so. And Leroy would just figure it out. And that was Leroy, and that's who you were going to talk to in a few minutes. The other thing is that you get from, or that Joe got from employee loyalty was at times when he needed extra financing, one of his sources of financing, of course, were his employees, which was really great. He'd turn around and make wonderful offers, and his employees would buy into it and back him up. And it gave him a ton of comfort through all those decades to have the employee loyalty that he had. And few companies that I'm aware of share that level of employee loyalty. Okay, so Joe was always about not just thinking differently, but doing things differently. And he sort of defined differentiation, at least with his products. For instance, price is an obvious differentiator. Obviously, everybody, you can differentiate your product line by price, and that's an easy one. Packaging and quantity. In other words, if the world is used to buying flour by the pound, maybe you could sell flour in a different quantity or in a different kind of container that was more useful. Again, that made your products different than what everybody can buy off of a typical grocery store shelf. Another way he would differentiate the products. Remember, every product in the store had to be different, not just some of them, but all of them. Eventually, he really got into this. But you can also differentiate products by ingredients and quality, making products with better ingredients, maybe no hormones, no preservatives, changing the ingredients up a little bit. And then, of course, uniqueness of products. And that's where the tradership concept came in. uniqueness, where Joe would say, hey, you know, when you got a guy at the top of your chain, at the top of your company saying, bring me unique products from around the world or bring me nothing at all, you're going to get a lot of unique products from around the world. So as you go through Trader Joe's, you know, think of these ideas or think of these concepts, because this was really important. This was really important to Joe. Okay, so some examples of differentiation are things like cheese. You know, how can you differentiate cheese when the world is selling cheddar and jack and the same kind of cheese, and they're selling them in the same blocks at the same price, and you have dairy consortiums sort of regulating the way you can sell cheese? How do you differentiate yourself when your customers say, hey Joe, I need you to sell cheese? Well, Joe would look over at Leroy and say, Leroy, find me some cheese. And one of the things Leroy did is Leroy went to France and found a cheese and brought it back. And this was a cheese that has become an American favorite, but it's called Brie. But one of the things about foreign cheeses back then was that if American cheeses were being regulated by American consortiums, you know, they can't regulate foreign cheese, right? So Trader Joe's, Leroy would go out and find all of these interesting foreign cheeses and foreign products that couldn't be regulated. And of course, Trader Joe's brought it in. He was able to negotiate a wonderful price for it. And he was able to put it on his shelf and bring it to America for less than what the grocery stores were selling Velveeta for, which is amazing. You guys remember Velveeta? Okay. Another fun cheese story that I like to tell. And Leroy always corrects me because I don't get the details exactly right here, but Leroy went to a Swiss cheese manufacturer, and he watched the guy boiling his vat of cheese, and the cheese was boiling because the heat was coming up from the middle, and you could see the bubbles in the middle of the pot. Well, the cheese around the edge of the pot wasn't bubbly. And so what the cheese guy would do is he would scoop out the bubbly cheese, and he would put it in the cheese molds and cool it while it was still maintaining its bubbles. And that's what you would get as Swiss cheese. And he would scrape off the other cheese from around the edge, the non-bubbled cheese, and toss it. And Leroy said, are you tossing that cheese? And the guy says, yeah, we're gonna, you know, we'll just find something else to do with it. And Leroy said, is there something wrong with that cheese? And the guy said, no, it's perfectly good cheese. It's the same cheese that was in the same pot that everybody's buying. And Leroy said, well, would you mind if, he says, well, why are you tossing it? And the guy says, well, because Americans want holes in their cheese, in their Swiss cheese. Swiss cheese has to have holes in it. Leroy says, well, can we buy it? And well, trainloads of cheese came out to California, and Trader Joe's cut it up and packaged it, and they called it Closed Eye Baby Swiss, and it sold like hotcakes. But that's a real, you know, way of differentiating your product, and which are really wonderful. One of my favorite stories is eggs. Eggs was one of those products that were regulated. How do you sell an egg? I mean, you can't sell a square egg. How different can eggs be? Well, Joe's customers wanted eggs, but he wanted products that were different. So Joe did his research like he always does, and he found a farmer, and this farmer had a special kind of egg. He had extra large eggs. Now, extra large eggs, there weren't a lot of chickens that were providing extra large eggs, and there certainly weren't enough eggs to provide the world of groceries, the whole grocery industry. So the whole grocery industry carried medium eggs, and those were the ones that were regulated. But because they didn't carry extra large eggs were not regulated. So Joe brought those in, and he was able to sell extra large eggs at the same price the rest of the grocery stores were selling medium eggs for. And he says in the book, that's how Trader Joe's was laid. Ooh, bad line. Okay. So what else is there in the book? This really is a story about, his building of the company, and the way Joe speaks is absolutely loving, and you really get a good sense of who he was as a man, as an individual. Yeah, when I first read the manuscript, it was clear, you grow with him. The phases of his life sort of parallel the phases of the store, and that paralleled the phases of what society was going through at the same time as well. When society was going through their sort of hippy dippy phase, Joe was kind of going through his hippy dippy phase, and guess what? The store went through its hippy dippy phase with all of its, homegrown vegetables and natural products and health foods and vitamins. And the store grew and changed as Joe grew and changed. And it's a wonderful to see his journey. What else is there in the book? Lots of things. How fair trade laws prevented him from being able to change the prices on wines and offer wines less expensively. But as he says in the book, that they found a loophole in the law, and by God, they drove a truck through it. And that's how Trader Joe's just broke the roof off the wine business and just exploded wine into the world, which is fantastic. Intensive buying, how Trader Joe's did their buying and how he set up that process. He defines Leroy's lighter than air distribution system, and he was really quite proud of that. And I'm kind of proud of Leroy as well. He talks about what you can hide behind private labeling, which is really great. And the skunks in the office were really about, his administrative team at the corporate office, and how few levels there were. There was almost no distance between the buyers and the customers. There wasn't 10 levels of management. There was, one or two. And so customers and the buyers are really close in Trader Joe's, which is why a lot of requests get taken care of. He talks about demand side retailing. He talks about supply side retailing, which is what I learned in economics. And then he talks about how he sold the company in 1979 to a German company called Albrecht, the Albrecht family. And then he stayed on for another 10 years and until 1989, when he finally said he was done. And now Leroy stayed on till well into the 2000s. So I'm going to let Leroy finish this all off. But this whole book is, again, Joe's words, Joe's story. What I loved about Joe and this story was the fact that he didn't have a negative thing to say about anybody or anything. He had such a positive spirit, and he was brilliant. Leroy has said on many occasions that Joe had a photographic memory, and that he used to comment that if you can't read 7 newspapers in a day, why bother? He wasn't boasting about his intelligence as much as he was saying that if you read 1 newspaper a day, you're really only confirming what you already know and believe. He was really much more about growing and learning. And he felt that you needed to have a lot of different inputs. Well, today we have the internet and we get a lot of different inputs now, whether we like it or not. Anyway, I want to say thank you so much. I wanted to keep my discussion short. I want to say hi to Leroy and also open this up to your questions and answer. And let me unshare my screen.
Okay. All right, Leroy, the floor is yours if you'd like to share a bit. And then I have some questions, and then I'll ask for some questions from people here. So Leroy, it's all yours.
Okay, well, I did meet, Patty did an incredible job of outlining the book there.
Boy, that was a speed talk, wasn't it? Sorry.
But I met Joe in 1957, and we hit it off real well. And then in 1958, we opened the first Toronto market, and which we spent the 9 years of opening Toronto markets. And then when Joe realized that the numbers of people who are graduating from college due to the college the GI Bill, and also the airplane, the 747, which had decimated the cost of traveling abroad and around the world. And so at that time, there's other reasons why, and you'll read it in the book better than I can describe it. But he had the feeling that he had to really get out of the Bantam market business and get into something different. And that's when he decided to think about how he could do that. And the result was Trader Joe's. And the idea of Trader Joe's was that we would be the guys that were traveling all over the world, finding these items that the people who had been doing the traveling, the soldiers and the military men, and also the people who just traveled because they could afford flying all around the world, could relive those experiences in those countries, and we would have all those products in our stores. And so that's what we did as buyers, and so that was a lot of fun, and we came up with a lot of different ideas. Joe was always very open to any ideas that his employees had. For example, you'll read it in the book. One of the employees was an avid hunter, and he thought that we should sell ammunition, and it met all of the criteria for a Trader Joe's product, and so we sold ammunition, and that until Kennedy was shot, and then we had to quit. So anyway, but it's just things like that, and he would come up with all these ideas that he thought would be good ideas in how the check stands were made, and how the stores would be laid out, and different things like that. And he'd say, Leroy, what do you think of that? And if I said, I think it's a pretty good idea, he says, well, then make it happen. So I loved my job more than anything I've ever loved. That was a good job.
Your wife, of course.
Yeah, his wife is sitting here.
Yeah, right.
Hi, Lisa.
Right. Anyway, but other than that, I just know, I'm reasonably sure at least, and also hope that you enjoy Joe's book as much as I enjoyed his 30 years of being the top man, and I was his as Patty said, his right-hand man. And so anyway, that's enough about me, and ask me anything you want, and I'll try to answer.
Okay, you know what? I actually have a question for Leroy. What do you think was the best decision that was made while you were at the company? And did you make it, or did Joe make it?
Oh, I would say that all of the good decisions were made by Joe. And but he turned to his staff and said, this is the idea, and if you like it, then you make it happen. And so that's the way it went. And can I come up with one thing that was the best idea? No, I can't, because there was so many of them, and they matched. And you learn a lot of them in the book, and so I couldn't come up with the best one. I could come up with one, but it would just be one of thousands.
Oh, you know, why don't you share one or two then?
Okay, well, Joe wanted Trader Joe's to be very big in cheese, and he gave that job to me, and to establish a cheese. And so, I, as Patty said, I was the one that went to France and found Brie, and I was able to negotiate. Took me over 2 years to negotiate a price that I could sell it, that I wanted to sell it for. And lo and behold, the little story on that one is we had cheese departments, and at that time they called them the people who run the cheese departments were called cheese girls. And so anyway, I had them take samples, cut little samples of the brie and put it on a tray and walk around the store and offer it to customers. And it wasn't very long, very many minutes since the store got open that I started getting phone calls from the stores saying, Leroy, they won't try the cheese at all. And I says, well, what are you telling me? He says, I'm telling them it's brie cheese, and they say, well, I don't like brie because it stinks and it's just bad cheese. And so I thought about it a little bit. And I said, then I called them all back and I said, look, this is what you do. Tell them it's a new cheese from France, brand new cheese from France, and you could taste it. And they all liked it when they tasted it. And so then I said, you can tell them what it is, and it's brie. And you can tell them why this brie is totally different than the bries that they have tasted in the past, because this one came directly from France to us in the United States. All the rest of the cheeses most cheeses came in through the East Coast on boats, ships, and then they would be distributed around the United States. Well, when they ordered brie on the West Coast, the East Coast people would send their old brie to the West Coast and keep the new brie for their order. And so that's why it had smelled like baby diapers and people didn't like it. So, but anyway, that was a real fun thing, and worked out great. And like Patty said, we were able to sell brie for less than Velveeta. So that turned out to be the largest importer of brie cheese in the United States, and we were the largest retailer of brie in the United States for many years. And same thing with English Stilton. I found English Stilton and made some very good buys on that. And I'll show you something that was awarded to me, if you can see it. It's what they call a Stilton Bell, and made out of Wedgwood, which is unbelievable. And so because when we were promoted as the largest importer of Stilton in the United States, the Queen actually has 125 of these made that year, and I got one of them. So it was great.
Wow,
that's cool. All right,
the brie and Stilton would probably be my favorite story.
Wow. Thank you. I'm gonna have to try the Stilton. I've only had the brie. So I'm gonna ask a question. Then I see that Melissa has her hand raised. So one question, Patty, what were some of the challenges in writing this book? I mean,
Actually,
it's kind of hard when Joe is already gone.
well, remember, I got the manuscript. Joe had already written it. So
Okay.
I didn't write the book, Joe did. I merely shepherded the process through, taking the raw manuscript, editing it, packaging it, making it really pretty, giving it a fake name and a fake cover. And then, giving it to my agent and saying, Paul, pitch this book and let's see what we can do with it. And HarperCollins won the bid. And then it took well over a year, Leroy, to work with HarperCollins to make, before the book was actually published. It was published this past June. And we're happy to say thank you to you guys, that the book has been on the bestseller list longer than it's been, almost as long as it's been out. So, which is really great.
Oh, great, thank you. All right, Melissa, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, my question, it's kind of two parts, but one, is there any particular event that prompted Joe to sell in the 80s? And then secondly, if you continued on after that, were you working for Aldi, the German company, I guess? And how was that working for them or with the guy who owns Aldi?
Well, the reasons he decided to sell and is discussed very nicely in the book. And for a number of different reasons, which would take a long time to explain them all, but they are explained well in the book. So there were good, very, very sound reasons for selling it to a German family, not a German company, which is a main differential, because and it was a handshake deal, and Theo Albrecht, the owner of half of the Aldis in the world, and there's about 8,000 Aldis around the world. They had a handshake and wrote 2 checks.
Love that handshake and a hug thing. But just to clarify, the Aldis that did the original deal with Joe are all gone, and of course the company went to their sons, and their sons ultimately split Aldi into 2 companies, Aldi North and Aldi South. I don't know where you all live, but Aldi South is the half of the company that the Aldi stores that have been popping up at least all over the United States and probably other countries as well. That's Aldi South, and Aldi North is the company that owns Trader Joe's. So they're not related to each other at all. So it's basically 2 brothers that have gone in completely different directions with their businesses, and the businesses are not related whatsoever.
So Leroy, I think the second part of Melissa's question was, after it was sold to the Albrechts, did you stay with Trader Joe's during that period?
Yes, I stayed till 2000, the end of 2001.
Okay.
Which was a total of 43 years at Trader Joe's and Prado Markets. And it was, and I think part of that question she asked too is was there how did that go? It went very, very well. They promised that they would not change Trader Joe's and that they would honor what Joe wanted to do, and they did. So they lived up to their promises. So
okay, thank you. So there's been a couple questions in the chat, and people should feel free to ask other questions in the chat. Nora asked, was there anything that wasn't in the book that we should know about? or that we shouldn't know about? That's interesting.
Leroy, you would know that better than I would.
Yeah. You know, is there anything that Joe left out that you wish he hadn't?
Okay, I can.
You both can handle this one. Go for it. No, go for it.
One of the things that Joe was really into was the arts. He was a huge fan of the arts, the opera, performing arts, visual arts as well. In fact, his wife Alice started the Los Angeles Opera League, and as they were small and growing, Joe used to print. He might have mentioned this in the book a little bit, but he would print the show schedules as advertisements on the paper bags, so that everybody that would shop at Trader Joe's would know about the opera schedule and hopefully buy tickets. That was his way of supporting the Opera League and Alice, his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we would do for the Western Regional Finals for the Metropolitan Opera, which were held at UCLA, and we would go there and serve wine and cheeses for the audience and the singers. And we did that every year there. And we also did, Pasadena has I think they're still doing it, an annual remodel contest of homes, and where they get maybe 5 to 7 homes that have been remodeled, and they go into contest, and people would tour through them, and then we set up wine and cheese tastings for those too. So
okay. There's another question. Let's see. Andrea asked, did you do much market research, or were a lot of the decisions just a natural understanding of the customers?
Well, I would say that it was well, as Patty very well described, Joe had this very strong feeling for the overeducated, underpaid, and that happened when there were several recessions that during our his 30 years as president and CEO of Trader Joe's, that were the highly educated people were losing their jobs because of the aviation companies that were being cut back and also that and then I think that I don't know whether I should say this or not, but I asked Joe, I said, what did you really want to be when you graduated from Stanford with your MBA? And he says, well, I always thought I wanted to be the youngest professor at Stanford. And then he says, but then I discovered how much professors make versus what I might be able to make in the grocery business. So I decided to be a groceryman. So
Thank you. So Frank Kilpatrick asks, how did Joe's original idea evolve? And I, as a corollary to that, I'd also like you to speak to, in the book, it talks about Good Time Charlie, Whole Earth Harry, and Mac the Knife, which I think is related to how things evolved. If you guys could talk about that, that would be great.
Yeah, actually, I can speak to that. As we mentioned a little bit earlier, in the 60s, when natural foods and back then in the 60s, one of the things that Joe saw was that grocery stores were sort of being ruled by fewer and fewer brands. In other words, back then, and I remember this, I mean, this is how our mother fed us, but the biggest brands were Swanson TV dinners and Hostess Twinkies and General Foods, General Mills cereals. And the big brands were buying up the smaller brands, and there were fewer brands in the stores. Those big brands bought, the bulk of the advertising space and controlled the bulk of the shelf space in the big grocery stores. So as that was happening, what Joe saw in his head was, he saw this happening. He saw that groceries were narrowing their brands, narrower and narrower. And America was, kind of being fed foods like this, kind of getting down into a funnel. What he saw was the space outside. He saw that the narrower the rest of the world got, the more space there was for him to do something different. Now, at the time, it was the 60s. And of course, that was the hippie era and natural foods and, fresh picked grass and other kinds of grass. And as we got into the 70s and the 80s, we got into all kinds of different things that people were asking him for. And he went through his Whole Earth Harry phase where he tried planting squash and pumpkins in his backyard, making his neighbors mad because they grew kind of sloppy. He, trying to find the farm to table concept. He was trying to bring that to his customers. And then as that evolved, it got more into the, he talks about his Mac the Knife, and by this point he was in his 30s and approaching his 40s, and that's where he sort of grew out of his hippy dippy years and really grew into his business years, and that's where he sharpened his pencil and really started coming up with the concept that every product on every shelf had to be profitable. If it wasn't profitable, and it had to be profitable per square inch. So, it had to be the most profit for the amount of space that it took on the shelf. And he really sharpened his pencil, and he ended up calling that phase his Mac the Knife phase. And that was the phase that he ended up selling to Aldi, to Albrecht.
Thank you. Leroy, did you want to talk to how things evolved? How did things change over the time that you worked there?
Oh, it was the first that was the joy of working with Joe for 30 years, and that was because it was constant change all the time, and just one thing after another. In fact, when I was looking for a job after I got out of the Navy, I was asked if I didn't want to get back into the grocery business because I'd been in the grocery business for 8 years before that. And I said, no, because it's kind of a dull business. It just never changes anything. And he says, well, I know the guy you should talk to there. And that's how I met Joe.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. So Marilyn Van Lobensells has a question. She says, it's fun to look at the names for his products. Where did he get his gift for words?
He has photographic memory for one thing, and he loved reading history. As you can tell in the book, he's very, very knowledgeable about history. And and that again was this overeducated, underpaid. The names of these names of products were kind of hidden in his mind, at least hidden from view, except for the people who are highly educated. And I'm trying to think of, Patty, help me out on a couple of those names that, well, like what he called the biscuits and the names, like, well, when one was also, the reason was that if it was a Spanish product, then he wanted it to be Jose, and if it was French, then it would be Giuseppe, or
That would be Italian.
Italian. So that you knew you had a tie-in with that, and but the name of the product was for like the Hindenburg. What product was named Hindenburg? I forget what it was now. But anyway, those items were hidden, what he thought hidden things for highly educated people. So okay. I'm not saying that very well. So, but anyway, that's the best way I could explain it. And, well,
He had a gift for words, and he loved puns, and he had a phenomenal sense of humor.
Yeah.
So you see that a lot in the names, you know.
Well, that in the advertising that he did and the pictures that he used in the flyer, he did all of that for the first 20 years, and in fact probably 25 years, and they would be. He would search through these books that were over 100 years old, so that they didn't have any
copyrights on the photos.
Copyrights anymore. So so that he could take those pictures, and then he'd make up some saying to go with the picture that he was trying to. That had to do with the product that the picture was next to. So.
Yeah, you know, in answer, I mean, I just read the book, but I was very impressed with how well Joe's liberal Stanford education served him. You know, like you say, he loved history. He clearly loved literature. He loved language. You know, and then he got his MBA. He was a kind of a Renaissance man. So we have another question from Odile. She says, why would Trader Joe never reveal the name of the manufacturers, like for frozen food or bakery products?
Oh, that's an easy one, because we discovered very, very early that Costco had a vice president that was visiting our #1 store up in San Francisco on like about every 2 or 3 days, and he would go through the store, and a good groceryman can go through a store and study it and decide and read and make good decisions on what is moving fast out of the store. And what would happen is Costco would go in, like one of the first item they did this was with French onion soup. French onion soup was a frozen package, and it came with two cups of French onion soup. And they went then they saw who the manufacturer was, and so they went to the manufacturer and says, we want them in 4s, and we want a very, very low price. And of course they got it. So that's why we decided we were going to put private labels on ours, so that it's much, much more difficult to find out who actually made it.
Oh, you can maintain control. Nobody, people don't know exactly what your recipe is. They don't know who your vendor is. They don't know, what your cost was. And it gives you a lot of control to do, what you want to in terms of price and quantity, and keep that away from your competitors.
Okay, I've got another question that was sent to me by Don Magdans. He says, Joe did not trust a computer that he couldn't carry. Did Trader Joe's ever use the large computers that allow integration of all facets of business?
Well, they they obviously had to go larger on certain items, but computers in the store, in the office, and in the stores are still small, and but when you're in the billions of dollars of sales, you have to have some larger pieces of equipment, and you also have to have it duplicated in more than one place in the United States in case of failures. That was what was happening there.
Thank you. So when here's another question. How did you find out that that person was a Costco vice president? How did you figure that out, that you had a little spy?
People with titles like to tell you that, like to spread the news. I mean, no, but it was a pretty obvious thing too. But no, he admitted who he was. So I don't know his name, but he did admit it.
So when you guys go to Trader Joe's now that it's owned by these other people, what do you see that's different? Like when you walk into the store, do you see something that you say, oh wow, Joe would never do this, or oh, this is a good idea that we hadn't gotten a chance to try yet? Like, what's something different that's big?
Well, my opinion is that the cornerstones of the company is the original cornerstones are still there, and I think that we'd have to say that with the in the last 20 years, there's been a tremendous amount of growth in the company, and that has come forth through the current CEO mainly. It started with the second CEO, which was John Shields, and he started expanding the company much bigger. And Joe had his own opinions of how big the company should be, and now they're continually building in probably anywhere from 30 to 35 stores a year, and they're over 540 some odd stores now.
And they all still have really bad parking lots.
Yeah.
That's actually another question. So Sarah Leslie asked, and she asked a question that I was thinking of before. There's this kind of urban myth going around that like Trader Joe's chooses its real estate by where the worst parking lots are. Is there any truth to that?
No, actually, Leroy's the right guy for this, because Leroy built, I don't know how many stores you built, 50 stores, 100 stores.
Oh, so we can blame you now.
Yes.
No, actually, parking is dictated by the shopping center, and it's so you have no say there, and the city also dictates, because they come in and say, well, you need so many handicap stalls, and but no, we have to admit that certainly some of the first stores were earlier stores had small parking lots, and but they also had a little bit lower volume. not all of them, but they and then they grew, and then they keep on growing. So every year the volumes keep on going up, and parking becomes more crowded. So
great. Well, I guess that's because I was in La Cañada and it had lousy parking, and then we'd go down to Pasadena and that had lousy parking too. So.
Oh, the one on the Royal Parkway. Yes, it only had about 35 parking stalls.
Yeah, it's pretty tough.
We pay the hot dog. It's not a hot dog. It's a hamburger. Lucky Boy, right? And we pay them a certain amount of money every month for them closing their eyes when our customers go over there and park in their lot. So.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have another question here. David Yoon asks, I love the variety of Korean food products at Trader Joe's. How did you think of and source these Korean products?
That was the buyer's job, and we would send our buyers. And I had the good fortune of being in charge of the buying department for 15 years, and we would send the buyers to Europe and all over the world to find new trends and new products, and of course we had a lengthy list of products due to our idea of having a place where the customers can relive their time and the foods and drinks they had when they traveled, and have another party at home. That was what we called it. So,
all right, thank you. Frank Kilpatrick asks, how did Joe very first get started before Pronto? Because he's right. I don't remember much about that in the book.
No, it's yes. There's a little bit in the book. He was working for Al Rexall, the drug.
Oh, that's
company.
right.
And
Right out of college.
while he was working for them, they had a bunch of cash that they wanted to invest in a retail company. So they hired Joe to find that company, and so he traveled around to many states, and in Texas he ran into the 7-Elevens, and he evaluated those and said, well, those stores will never come to California, and he had his reasons why, and because of their size and their financing at that time. But anyway, he felt that with some minor changes, they could be a very profitable store in California, and so and he made those changes. He made the changes. Instead of being 2,000 square feet, we started out with 2,400 square foot stores, and we had what we tried for was 85% of all the items that are sold in a supermarket we had in the store. Now, 85% means you had one can of corn, one can of peas, and only one size and one of every item. But we did try for 85% of everything you could buy at a supermarket, letting not with the exclusion of paper products and large items which had low value per cubic inch.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to try to stop at 8. I have 3 more questions here, but I mean, we'll see if we can get them answered. So we're going to go quickly here. So Billy Huan asks, he says, you mentioned how part of Trader Joe's strategy was finding regulatory loopholes. Did Joe or his team have a legal background, or how did they know how to find and exploit those loopholes?
Joe was an avid reader, reading just speed lightning and photographic memory. So he did all the research of the rules and regulations that like the milk regulations and the wine regulations and all. He went. In fact, it says in there, I think it says in the book about the liquor license that we bought, which was like a 30-year-old license, if I recall correctly. And why did we go back and buy a 30-year-old license? Because it was the only license that had the rights that we wanted in our winery, which we opened a winery.
Thank you. So the next 2 questions are somewhat related. I'm going to ask them both. So Marie Shipman asks, how were new employees recruited? And Rieko Mendez asks a similar question. How does Trader Joe's ensure consistent customer experience across all its stores across the US? Is there something that Trader Joe's with employee orientation or with training how they hire?
Yes.
Yes, there is. Patty, did you want to say that one?
No, go ahead.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I mean, they have a training program, and it's a very stringent training program that they put people through. They don't just throw people in a store like most companies do.
No, we have it is an extensive number of classes that they go to, and we send them to like a school to learn these things, how to deal with customers, how to deal with the how to sell products, and how to deal just in general. And the other thing is that they when after you find your employee that you think you want to hire, potential employee, they they know they're going to be paid very good wages, and so that is another thing that keeps them happy. But I think most of all, they really are a happy group because they know so much about the products, and they really get turned on when they have an attorney or a doctor or whatever come in there, and they know their customers and they know what they are and all. And when they ask us, oh, well, I'm having turkey tonight or this weekend, and what's the best wine I should have for that? And they know, so that makes them happy.
Great. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this up. Is there anything that you guys wanted to add, Patty and Leroy? Is there anything that you wish that we had asked?
Well, I had one question I thought was going to be asked. It wasn't asked, and that is, how do we keep our vendors happy? Well, that's another thing that isn't done by anybody but Trader Joe's. I don't think. We pay in cash 10 days after we get the product. So that's usually, it's more like 30, 60, 90 days that vendors sell or get their pay. So anyway, that's what'd you say? I can't hear. Oh, and the other thing is that Trader Joe's doesn't want anything in return from the vendors. They don't want, they don't want to, they don't pay slotting allowances. They don't pay, but they don't want return privileges. They don't want damaged goods taken care of. We take care of everything. Once we have the product in our hands, it's our product, and we don't ask them for anything. So that makes them happy.
Okay, great. All right, well, I think we're done. Thank you both so much. This was wonderful. We have a nice group of people here today, and I think we're all going to be looking at Trader Joe's differently the next time we go there. I know for one, I'm going to pick up a Fearless flyer and read it cover to cover. So anyway, thank you. I hope that everybody either has read the book or does read the book ASAP. I have already recommended it to a bunch of people. I absolutely loved it. So thank you. All right.
And can I add one thing?
Oh, go ahead, Patty.
I just want to say, if you want the book signed, you can get it from my website. If you don't care that it's signed, you can get it from Amazon. And my website is pattycivalleri.com.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a great rest.
Thank you so much for having us tonight.
Okay. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.